always believed I had raised my son to be confident about where he came from. We didn't have much, but what we had was earned with dignity. I worked 2, sometimes 3 jobs when he was growing up, cafeteria shifts, cleaning offices, anything that kept our lights on and his backpack full. I never hid our struggles from him. I simply taught him not to be ashamed of them. But the day he told me he wanted me to meet his girlfriend's family, something in his voice made my chest tighten. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't even nerves. It was fear. The kind of fear people feel when they know they're being judged before they even walk into the room. "They're good people, Mom," he said. They come from a different world. A different world." I knew exactly what he meant. A week later, as he stood in my living room trying to convince me to wear jewelry I never bought and clothes I never owned, I realized that fear wasn't for himself. It was for me. He didn't want them to look down on me, on us, on where he came from. And that was the moment my decision was made. I would not go there dressed in the nice outfit he bought me. I would not pretend to be someone I wasn't. No, I would let them think I was small, quiet, harmless, even simple. Because I've learned, in life, that arrogant people don't show their true nature in front of equals. They show it when they think they're superior. So on the day of the visit, I put my hair into a simple braid, wore my old knitted cardigan, and slipped on shoes so worn I could feel the memories in every crease. My son nearly choked. "Mom, why would you dress like you're struggling?" I smiled softly. "I'm not acting, sweetheart. This is who I am. If they don't respect that, then I need to know." He didn't like it, but I saw the child in him, the boy who used to worry he couldn't invite friends over because our furniture was mismatched, and my heart ached. He shouldn't have carried that weight, but children in single-parent homes often absorb guilt silently. We drove to the neighborhood, and I mean this literally. I felt my lungs compress when the security guard lifted the gate. It wasn't a house, it was a compound. Smooth stone driveway, hedges trimmed so perfectly they looked airbrushed, a fountain taller than our old apartment building's stairwell. My son stiffened in the driver's seat. He wasn't awed, he was stressed. He shouldn't have been. Love shouldn't come with anxiety. When we knocked on the heavy wooden door, a maid, an actual uniformed maid, opened it. She glanced at me, and her eyes softened slightly. She wasn't like the people who owned the place. I could tell right away. "Welcome," she said. But then came the mother. Oh, the mother. She appeared in a cream silk blouse and diamonds that could blind a small town. Her smile was thin, polite, and sharp enough to slice a person in half. Her eyes swept me up and down, not in curiosity, but in evaluation. That 1-second scan told me everything. She had already decided I did not measure up. Her father followed next, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, and radiating the entitled confidence of a man who had been told yes his entire life. But unlike the mother's barely concealed disdain, the father barely acknowledged me at all. I was furniture, background noise, an optional detail. Their daughter, my son's girlfriend, was the only one whose smile was genuine. But it was the smile of someone permanently apologizing for her family. Her shoulders were tight, her voice soft, and the second she looked at me, I sensed she was praying I wouldn't take the way her parents looked at me personally. But I took everything personally. We stepped inside, and immediately, the air shifted. The mother's voice became full of exaggerated sweetness aimed at my son, and carefully measured, condescending politeness toward me. "Oh, welcome. Thank you so much for coming," she said, adjusting her necklace even though it didn't need adjusting. "We're so excited to meet your mother." The pause before "your mother" was subtle, but insulting enough to echo. I offered her the small box of homemade cookies I prepared. A family recipe that had gotten us through years of birthdays when money was tight. She took the box with 2 fingers, the way people pick up trash they don't want to accidentally touch fully. How quaint. She placed the cookies on a marble table without even glancing inside. The daughter saw it, her eyes flickered with embarrassment. My son didn't catch a thing. He was too distracted trying to impress them, sitting straighter, adjusting his shirt, smiling awkwardly. They praised him, overly praised him, complimenting his job, his success, the boutique tech firm he worked for, but the compliments felt rehearsed, scripted, targeted. Something was off. When we walked into the dining room, their eyes expressed a silent conversation I wasn't meant to see. The mother whispered something to the father, and he nodded, glancing briefly at my son like he was inspecting merchandise. We sat down for dinner, and I deliberately kept my posture soft, as if I were overwhelmed by the luxury. I asked gentle questions, smiled at every answer, played into their assumptions. And the more harmless I appeared, the more honest they became. The father asked my son about his finances. The mother asked about his job security. They asked how ambitious he planned to be after the wedding. Not once did they ask about love, or compatibility, or happiness, just status. Safety nets, assets. I wasn't eating anymore. I was studying, watching, calculating. And right when I leaned forward to sip my water, I heard the first slip. The father leaned toward the mother and quietly said, "He's better than we expected. Polished, easy to guide." Guide into what? I kept my eyes down, pretending I was focused on cutting a piece of chicken. But the words burrowed into my mind. When the daughter heard it, she froze. I saw her fingers tremble around her fork. My instincts sharpened. They weren't welcoming my son into the family. They were recruiting him. When dinner ended, the father clapped my son on the back and said he wanted to talk business in the study. The daughter opened her mouth to protest, tiny, but noticeable, and her mother shot her a glare so sharp it silenced her instantly. I stayed behind with the daughter while the door to the study clicked shut. The house was too quiet, the air too heavy. She sat beside me, hands shaking in her lap. After a long minute, she whispered, "Please, please don't think my family is what you saw tonight. They're not usually like this." But the fear in her voice proved otherwise. Before I could ask what she meant, before I could comfort her, yell for my son, or stand up, the father's voice echoed faintly through the study door. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't welcoming. It was business. And my son, my sweet, honest son, was in there alone. I knew I had to hear what they were planning. So, with every ounce of calm I had mastered in a lifetime of surviving and observing, I stood up quietly and stepped toward the hallway leading to the study. Because if those people thought I was naive, they were about to make the biggest mistake of their lives. I moved slowly down the hallway, each step quiet enough not to echo against the marble floor. The house felt too big, the air too cold, the silence too heavy. Everything about that place screamed wealth, but none of it felt like home. It felt like a museum of intimidation, designed to make people like me feel small. But I wasn't small. I just let them believe I was. As I approached the study, I could hear the muffled rumble of the father's voice. My heart pounded so loudly, I feared they might hear it through the door. I paused, placing 2 fingers lightly on the dark mahogany surface, pretending to straighten a framed picture on the wall in case someone walked by. Then I leaned slightly toward the crack near the hinges and listened. The father's tone was calm, but something about it made the hair on my arms rise. It was the voice of a man who wasn't asking, he was instructing. "I need someone reliable," he was saying. "Someone who won't question me. Someone with everything to gain, and too much to lose." My son sounded confused. "What do you mean?" "You're a good kid," the father continued. "Hard-working, polite, a self-made type. Men like you thrive when they're given opportunity, and I'm prepared to give you a great deal of it. Once the marriage is finalized." I pressed closer to the door. My son hesitated before answering. "I'm marrying your daughter because I love her, not because I want something from you." There was a pause, a small, unsettling one. The father let out a low laugh, one without humor. "Love is a luxury emotion, son. Money is real. Security is real. Power is real. Those are the things that protect families." He lowered his voice. "And I protect what's mine." I felt a cold wave roll through my chest. I gripped the doorframe so hard my knuckles went white. My son said, quietly but firmly, "I don't think I understand what you're asking." "You will," the father replied. "In fact, you won't even have to do much. Just become part of our business network, sign a few documents, stand with us publicly. The marriage will make it all seamless." "Documents? What kind of documents?" "Partnership papers," the father said, "allowing us to hold certain assets under your name temporarily. It protects us, legally keeps things clean. You'll still benefit. We all will." I felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. They weren't recruiting him. They were setting him up. My son took a breath, and I could hear the tension in his voice. "Sir, I'm not comfortable signing anything like that. I don't put my name on something unless I know exactly what it is." The father's voice hardened. "I wasn't asking you to understand it. I was telling you to sign it." Something crashed softly inside the room, a glass. Maybe my son must have knocked something over. "Look," my son said, "I love your daughter, but I'm not getting involved in something I don't fully understand. I can't." "You will," the father snapped. If you care about her. I froze. My son didn't. That sounds like a threat, he said quietly. Another pause, another dangerous silence. Then the father said, voice low and icy, it's a promise. That was enough. I was about to push the door open when someone touched my shoulder from behind. I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was the daughter, my future daughter. Her face was pale, her eyes glossy with fear. Please, she whispered, don't go in there. My voice trembled, but with anger, not fear. He's threatening my son. She swallowed hard. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Her hands were shaking, and for the first time, I saw the truth in her eyes. That girl wasn't spoiled. She wasn't arrogant like her parents. She was trapped. She had grown up in that house of dominance, manipulation, expectations, and silence. My dad does this, she whispered. He makes people feel like they owe him, and if they don't do what he wants, he makes their lives hell. I stared at her, every instinct flaring with protective fire. How long has he been planning this? I asked. She blinked, and a tear slipped down her cheek. Since before I even met your son. My stomach dropped. What? I whispered. My dad, she said shakily, has been trying to merge with the company your son works for. They denied him last year. He took it personally. When he found out you raised your son with nothing, he said it meant he'd be easier to control, easier to motivate with promises. I felt sick, she continued, her voice breaking. When I fell in love with your son, I thought my dad would finally understand that I wanted something for myself. But instead, he saw it as an opportunity. I closed my eyes for a moment, absorbing the weight of everything. And your mother? I asked softly. The girl laughed bitterly. She only cares about status, power, marriage, alliances. She thinks love is something people in movies talk about. I took a deep breath, pushing back the anger that was crawling up my throat. So they're using my son, the daughter nodded, tears streaming now, and using me. She looked at the study door, terrified. He thinks if your son loves me enough, he'll give in, he'll sign, and once he does, he'll be tied to my father for life, legally, financially, publicly. The air around us seemed to freeze. I wasn't poor, I wasn't naive, I wasn't simple, I was a mother, and something primal rose in me, a kind of cold, calculating fire I hadn't felt in years. I put a hand on her shoulder. Sweetheart, step aside. Her eyes widened. You're going in there. I'm done letting them think I'm weak. I placed my hand on the doorknob, and right as I twisted it, the father's voice echoed again. If he won't sign willingly, we'll encourage him. I flung the door open, and every pair of eyes in that room snapped toward me. The moment I opened that study door, the room froze like someone had poured ice water over everyone inside. My son's eyes widened, first fear, relief, confusion, all crashing together in that single expression. The father leaned back in his leather chair, annoyed at being interrupted, while the mother appeared in the doorway behind me, like she had been trailing her daughter, her lips tightening into a thin, polished line. Is everything okay? I said, pretending not to notice the tension in the air. Though my voice carried enough steel to slice through it, the father raised an eyebrow, clearly irritated. This is a private conversation. Private conversations don't include threats, I replied softly. My son straightened in his chair. He had been sitting stiffly, but now he stood, moving instinctively to my side. The father's jaw flexed, his eyes narrowing, calculating his next move. That man wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he thought beneath him. I could see the disbelief forming on his face. How dare the poor, plain, little mother interrupt him? But I didn't care. I would interrupt the president if he talked to my son that way. Thought my presence had thrown him off, and he tried recovering with a rehearsed smile. Your son and I were simply discussing business. No, I corrected gently. You were trying to corner him. He blinked. My son exhaled sharply. The daughter closed her eyes, like she could feel the explosion coming. Then the father stood slowly, deliberately, a move meant to intimidate. Ma'am, he said, I think you are misunderstanding. No, I said, stepping further into the room. I think you're underestimating me. That's your mistake. He wasn't used to being spoken to like that. I saw his face twitch with offense. Before he could respond, his daughter spoke from behind me, voice trembling. Dad, please, stop this. Just stop. This isn't right. Her mother immediately whipped toward, her whisper hissing, not here, not now. But it was too late. The truth was already hanging in the air like smoke. The father shot his daughter a glare so sharp it could carve stone. But she didn't shrink this time. She clung to the doorway, fingers curled tightly. as if the whole house might collapse if she let go. My son stepped forward. Is someone going to tell me what's going on? His voice cracked with a mix of anger and disbelief. He wasn't the scared little boy I once raised. He was a man now. And he looked betrayed. The father scoffed. Your mother is creating drama where there is none. I tilted my head slowly. Then explain the documents you want him to sign. Explain the assets in his name. Explain why you said he'd have too much to lose. Go ahead. I'd love to hear the honest version. The father clenched his jaw. Those were business arrangements. Perfectly legal. Perfectly legal. I laughed softly. Sir, I may not have your money, but I know a setup when I hear one. You weren't offering my son an opportunity. You were preparing a fall guy. His eyes flashed. My son inhaled sharply. The daughter nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. The mother tensed, finally realizing their secrets were slipping. What is she talking about? My son asked, voice rising. A fall guy for what? The father's eyes flickered guilt, frustration, panic, but only for a second. He kept his voice controlled, but the edges were fraying. You're overanalyzing. I'm listening. You should try it. He slammed his hand on the desk, making the lamp shake. You do not understand what you're accusing me of. This family, my family, has built everything through calculated partnerships. And how many of those partners went to jail in your place? I asked quietly. His nostrils flared. The mother gasped, scandalized, as if I'd cursed inside a church. The daughter's face crumpled. My question confirmed something she already feared. My son turned to her. Is this true? She broke. She actually collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. It's true, she whispered. It's always the same. Dad does something risky, then finds someone new to sign things so he's protected. When I met you, I hoped he wouldn't use you. But he said people like you humble people don't fight back. My son's face turned red, not from embarrassment, but from anger. Pure, burning anger. The father barked. That's enough. No, my son shot back. You don't get to silence her anymore. For the first time, I saw fear flicker in the father's eyes. Not fear of me, not fear of the truth, fear of losing control. I stepped closer to my son, placing a hand on his arm. I could feel his pulse. It was racing. The father straightened, trying to regain dominance. You can walk away from this house right now if you want. But if you hurt my daughter, hurt her, I said, shocked. You've been hurting her for years. You've suffocated her so much she's afraid to speak. My son looked at his fiancée, really looked at her for the first time since we entered that house. She wasn't just nervous. She wasn't just quiet. She was broken in places her parents refused to see. Is this why you never talk about your childhood? He asked her gently. She nodded, chin trembling. I didn't want you to think I was damaged. You're not damaged, he said softly. You're trapped. The mother snapped. Trapped. Our daughter has everything. I turned to her, except freedom. My words echoed, harsh, honest, undeniable. Then the father raised his voice, looking directly at me for the first time, with real fury. You came into my home and pretended to be something you're not. You think you understand how this world works. You think you're smarter than me? I smiled, a small, deadly smile. I think I'm a mother, and that makes me dangerous to men like you. He stared at me, stunned, unable to respond. I continued, stepping directly into his line of power. You saw my old shoes, my sweater, my quietness, and you thought I was weak. But you don't understand something crucial. I leaned just slightly closer. You can't intimidate someone who's been through real struggle. You can't scare someone who's already survived the worst life can throw at them. And you definitely can't manipulate my son while I'm breathing. Silence, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. My son put his arm around me, a gesture that said he finally understood everything. We're leaving, he said. The mother gasped. You can't just. The father glared. If you walk out that door, don't come back. His daughter whispered, barely audible. Please, don't leave me here. Her voice cracked so softly it broke something in me. My son stepped forward. Come with us. Her eyes widened, hope and terror blending into one. The father roared, You're not leaving this house. But he was about to learn something very important. He might own the house. He might own the cars. He might own every inch of polished marble in that mansion. But he did not own his daughter. And he did not own my son. And he sure as hell did not own me. My son reached for her hand, and the house erupted. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I kept seeing the judgmental expressions of the Harris family, like shadows pressed against the walls of my mind, their smirks, their raised eyebrows, their whispered opinions they thought I couldn't hear. For years, I had protected my peace. I had lived quietly, traveled only when I could afford it, worked my long shifts, and minded my own business. I hated drama, but suddenly it felt like I had walked straight into a storm created by people who didn't even know me. But two emotions refused to let me sleep: hurt and curiosity. Because something was off, very off, about the way the Harris family behaved. Their pride didn't match their reality. Their confidence felt forced. Their upper-class attitude felt like a costume. And the biggest alarm bell, how desperate they were for a wedding that obviously made them uncomfortable. So the next morning, I decided I was done playing the quiet, fragile woman they assumed I was. I wasn't going to expose myself, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let them expose my son's happiness either. Still dressed in my pajamas, I stepped into the kitchen where Daniel was making coffee. His back was turned, and his shoulders looked tight, like he hadn't slept either. "Morning," I said softly. He poured a second cup and slid it toward me without turning around. "Morning, Mom." We sat down in silence. He was tapping his foot under the table. Daniel never tapped his foot unless something was seriously bothering him. "Talk to me," I finally said. He exhaled and rubbed his forehead. "I don't know, Mom. He hesitated. "You didn't do anything wrong. But the way they treated you, it just made me feel, I don't know, embarrassed." I nodded slowly. "Embarrassed of me?" "No." He immediately straightened. "Not you. Embarrassed of how they acted." That eased something inside me. "But I also," he swallowed, "I feel like I'm stuck between you and the Harrises, and Ava's in the middle of it." I took a sip of my coffee, buying myself time. "Do you love her?" I asked. "More than anything." "Then we'll figure this out," I said. "But Daniel, I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "Let's just say, your mother didn't grow up naive. I've played the fool before when it was necessary." He blinked. "Mom, what exactly are you planning?" I stood up. "Nothing harmful, nothing messy. But I won't let anyone walk into your marriage thinking they're above us. I won't let anyone treat you like you're the one lucky to be chosen." He stared at me. "Mom, please don't start a war." I leaned over and kissed his forehead. "Sweetheart, I don't start wars. I finish them." Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Ava. "Hi, Mrs. R. Can we meet today? Just you and me." Ah, so the princess wanted her private audience. I typed back, "Of course, dear, pick a time." Daniel looked nervous when he saw her name. "Please, be gentle with her." I raised a brow. "Gentle is not the problem. What is?" "Truth," I said. "Truth is what scares people like her family." He didn't understand, not yet, but he would soon. A few hours later, I drove to meet Ava at a small, pretty cafe, the kind of place with pastel walls, tiny plants on the tables, and cakes that cost more than they should. She was already there, looking beautiful but stressed, staring into her untouched latte. When she spotted me, she stood and hugged me, genuinely hugged me. "That surprised me. Thanks for coming," she whispered. I sat across from her. "Of course, what's on your mind?" She twisted her ring nervously, avoiding my eyes. "I want to apologize for my family," she blurted out. They weren't fair to you. They were rude, and I'm so embarrassed." My heart softened a little. "Ava, sweetheart, you don't owe me an apology for their behavior." But she shook her head. "Yes, I do. Because I know what they were thinking, and I know what they whispered." I leaned forward. "I know too. I'm not as fragile as they think." Her eyes finally met mine, and suddenly I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. Not fear of me. Fear of something else. "I need to tell you something," she said quietly. "Something Daniel can't know yet." That instantly put me on alert. "Ava, what is it?" She looked around nervously, lowering her voice. "My family." She swallowed. "We're not as wealthy as they pretend to be." Ah, there it was, thought the mask slipping. But she wasn't done. "We're actually in serious financial trouble." I didn't blink. "And they think Daniel is, how do I say this? He's their escape route." I froze. Every muscle in my body turned cold. "Come again," I whispered. "They think Daniel is stable, responsible, smart, someone who will eventually earn enough to help support me, which means supporting them." I felt the anger rise slowly, quietly, dangerously. "And they assumed," she whispered, "that because you looked poor, you wouldn't be able to help me financially, and that Daniel might think twice about marrying me if he knew the truth." I stared at her for a long moment, not because I was shocked, but because everything suddenly made sense. The fake luxury, the attitude, the desperation for the engagement, the way they inspected me like merchandise. They weren't looking down on me. They were terrified of me. They thought I was poor, and that meant Daniel wouldn't have family money to fall back on in their scheme. My family isn't bad, she continued softly. Just proud and scared, but I'm tired of hiding things, and I want you to know that I love Daniel, for real. I don't want anything from him except a life together. I studied her face for a long moment. She wasn't lying. Her eyes were too raw, too honest, but the truth she revealed, that truth lit a fire in me, because now I knew exactly what the Harris family really wanted. Not a son-in-law. They wanted a sponsor. And they believed I was too poor, too naive, too harmless to stop them. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I reached across the table and held Ava's hand gently. Thank you, I said softly, for trusting me. She nodded, tears in her eyes. Please don't tell Daniel yet. I just want to talk to them first. But I needed someone on my side. You have me, I said. But inside my mind, another voice spoke, and now I know exactly how to take your family down, without ruining you or Daniel. This story was only getting started. When I drove home from the cafe, my mind was spinning so fast I could barely keep my hands steady on the steering wheel. Ava's confession didn't just open a window, it shattered the entire wall. For the first time, I understood everything. Why her mother's eyes kept darting across my clothes, why her father kept mentioning expectations, why her brother evaluated Daniel like a piece of real estate, why they acted like the engagement was urgent, why they suddenly changed the wedding plans 3 times in the same week. They weren't wealthy, they weren't noble, they weren't elite, they were drowning. And Daniel, my sweet, hardworking, level-headed son, was their lifeboat. But the biggest twist, they believed I was another sinking ship. And oh, how wrong they were. I walked into the house, took off my coat, and sat on the couch, thinking, I could have told Daniel immediately. I could have confronted the Harrises. I could have demanded answers. But no, not yet, because timing is everything, and reactions reveal more truth than confessions. I needed to see, with my own eyes, how far the Harris family was willing to go, and I needed to decide how much of myself I was going to reveal in return. My phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Thank you again. Please don't worry. I'll talk to my parents tonight. I replied, take your time. I'm here if you need me. But I wasn't calm. I wasn't relaxed. Inside me, something old and powerful had awakened. The part of me that built a life out of nothing, that survived heartbreak, divorce, years of raising a child alone, juggling bills, and pretending everything was fine. The part of me that only comes out when someone tries to harm my family. I took a slow breath. I guess the poor, naive mother has to disappear, I muttered to myself. Daniel got home around 6 p.m. He looked exhausted but relieved to see me. How was your day? He asked, dropping his bag on the table. Interesting, I said, with a small smile. He frowned. What does that mean? It means I'm learning a lot about people and motives. He froze a bit. Mom, did something happen? I shook my head. Nothing you need to worry about yet. That doesn't help, he said, half frustrated. I touched his arm. Trust me, please. When the time is right, everything will make sense. He exhaled slowly and nodded, even though I could see the worry still in his eyes. I didn't want to drag him into this yet, not until I had all the pieces. That night, I sat alone in my room, thinking. I pulled out the drawer beside my bed and took out the small, black envelope I kept hidden inside. Inside, it was a set of documents, things I never spoke about. My financial records, my investments, my property ownerships, things Daniel didn't even know about yet. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I wanted him to build his own confidence, not rely on mine. But if the Harris family knew who I truly was, they would choke on their arrogance. And that alone made me smile. The next morning, something unexpected happened. At 9:13 a.m. sharp, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I answered casually. Hello. A loud, sharp voice responded. Is this Daniel's mother? Oh. I recognized the tone instantly. Mrs. Harris? Yes, I said. This is Lauren Harris, she continued, her voice tight, trimmed with irritation. I leaned back in my chair. Ah, so the Queen herself wanted a private meeting. What can I do for you? I asked. We need to talk. In person. I raised an eyebrow even though she couldn't see it. About what? About yesterday, about how things were presented, and about what expectations we have moving forward. I almost laughed. Expectations. Oh. She had no idea how wrong this call was about to go. Of course, I replied sweetly. Where would you like to meet? The country club, she snapped. 1 hour. I paused. A country club, the perfect place to hide insecurity behind overpriced salads and fake smiles. I'll be there, I said calmly. She hung up without a goodbye. Classic. When I arrived at the club, Lauren was already there, sitting at an outdoor table with her shoulders pulled back like she was posing for a magazine cover. Her husband, Rick, sat beside her, pretending to read something on his phone. He looked more nervous than important. Her daughter, Brooke, was also there, flipping her hair, sipping iced tea like she was waiting for gossip to begin. I approached, and Lauren didn't even stand. Sit, she ordered softly. I sat, then she began with no hesitation. We need to clear the air. I folded my hands. Then clear it, she blinked, clearly not expecting that tone. Well, she began again. There are certain standards in our family. Ah yes, the standards. I nodded politely. I understand, and yesterday, you came dressed in a way that made things uncomfortable. I stared at her. She stared back. Brooke chimed in. It's just, like, we don't want people thinking Daniel is marrying into a family, you know, below him. Below him. My jaw flexed. Rick cleared his throat, looking embarrassed, but too cowardly to intervene. I stayed calm. Is that what you think? I asked softly. That I'm below you. Lauren didn't blink. We just feel certain appearances are important, especially in a marriage that will reflect on both families. Reflect what, exactly? I asked. That we maintain a certain lifestyle, she said proudly, and we expect the people connected to us to match that. Well, there it was. I slowly folded the napkin in front of me, keeping my expression neutral. Interesting, I said, because lifestyles often look different once you're inside the house instead of staring at the exterior. Lauren stiffened. Rick looked down. Brooke's jaw dropped slightly. They heard the hidden meaning, and it terrified them. Lauren retightened her jaw. I'm not sure what you're implying, but I'm implying nothing, I interrupted smoothly, just making an observation. It was silent for a moment. Then, in a much colder voice, Lauren said, we only want what's best for Ava, and we expect Daniel to be someone who can support her future. Ah, there it was, the motive, the desperation, the agenda. I leaned forward slowly, staring directly into her eyes. And tell me, Ms. Harris, exactly how much support will your daughter need? She froze. Her eyes darted just for a second, and that was all I needed. I kept my tone soft, velvet over steel, because from where I'm sitting, your family doesn't seem to be standing as tall as you pretend to. Her lips parted in pure shock. Rick looked like someone had just smacked him with a newspaper. Brooke's iced tea straw slipped from her fingers. I smiled politely, stood up, and placed a few bills on the table. For my drink, I said, I wouldn't want to add to your financial concerns. Lauren's face turned the color of raw anger. I continued, and just so we're clear, I may look poor to you, I may dress simply, I may sit quietly, but don't mistake humility for weakness. They stared. I added one last thing, and don't ever think you can use my son. Then I turned and walked away before they could even breathe. As I reached my car, my hands finally trembled. Not from fear, not from nerves, from power. Because now, the Harris family knew. The poor, naive mother act was over, and the real me had stepped into the game. When I drove away from the country club, I expected the anger to fade. It didn't. It simmered. Not because they insulted me. I had been insulted before. I had been underestimated before. I had been treated like I was less than before. But because they thought they could manipulate my son's entire future, while pretending they were doing us a favor, and now that I knew the truth about their financial mess, every little thing they had said replayed in my head, with a new meaning. Their judgment wasn't rooted in superiority, it was rooted in desperation. Desperation that made them cruel, desperation that made them bold, desperation that made them stupid. And now, after the way I confronted them, one thing was certain, the Harrises were going to react, and their reaction would tell me everything I needed to know. Around 3 p.m., my phone rang. Daniel. I took a breath before answering. Hi, sweetheart, Mom, he said immediately. Ava's upset, really upset. Did something happen today? The dominoes were already falling. What did she say? I asked calmly. She just said her parents are angry and she feels caught in the middle. Mom, did you meet them? I didn't lie. Yes, I said. They asked to meet me. And I stood up for myself. And for you. He exhaled loudly. Mom, I asked you not to, Daniel. My voice was quiet but firm. I didn't start anything. They did, and I handled it. He paused. Handled how? I told them the truth. He groaned in frustration. Mom, no, I said. You need to understand something. They want something from you. They want something from us. And they think they can shame us into giving it to them. He was silent. Then he said, softly, I wish you had waited. I know, I replied, but some things can't wait. And some people don't deserve patience. He didn't respond right away. Then, Ava wants to talk to you. She's on her way. I blinked. To the house. Yes. Double quotes. Well, this was going to be interesting. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ava standing there, her breathing shaky, her hair messy, her eyes swollen from crying. Mrs. Art, she whispered, can we talk? Of course, I said gently. Come inside. She stepped in, and I led her to the living room. She sat on the couch, gripping her purse like it was the only thing keeping her together. Are you all right? I asked softly. She shook her head. My parents, they're furious, she said, voice trembling. They said you insulted them in public. I stayed calm. I didn't insult them. I said, I just stopped them from insulting me. She stared at her hands. They feel like you're judging them. I actually laughed quietly, but enough for her to look up. Judging them. Ava, your parents judged me before I even spoke. She swallowed hard. I know they were rude, and I told them they were wrong. But after you left, things got bad. How bad? I asked. She hesitated. Then she said something that genuinely shocked me. They told me to postpone the wedding. I froze. Postpone. I repeated, why? She looked away, ashamed, because they think you're hiding something. They said no normal poor person would react the way you did. I smirked. So they noticed. Yes, and they think. Her voice cracked. They think maybe Daniel is hiding something too. I stared at her. Ava, why would they think that? Because they can't understand why someone with no money would be so calm. Unless they're pretending. So, the mask I showed them wasn't just confidence, it was a threat. Do your parents know you told me about their financial problems? I asked. Her eyes widened. No, and they can't know. They'll never forgive me. I nodded slowly. Then why are you here, Ava? She finally broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Because I choose Daniel, she whispered. Not them. I love him. And I don't want to lose him because my parents are panicking about their image and money. Her shoulders shook as she cried harder. I moved beside her and handed her a tissue. Ava, I said softly, you did the right thing, and I'm not angry with you. She looked up through tears. But my parents, they don't stop. And they want to meet with all of us. You, me, and Daniel. Tonight. So this was the battle line. And what exactly do they want? I asked. She hesitated. To get clarity. Clarity about what? She took a deep breath. About your financial situation. I stared at her. Double quotes. Ava, your parents want me to prove I'm poor or not. She winced. They want to know what Daniel is marrying into. I set down my tea. This family truly had no shame. So they want to interrogate me. I asked. She nodded helplessly. My dad said dend. I'm just repeating. He said he refuses to let his daughter marry into a financial mystery. A financial mystery. That was new and ridiculous. But also hilarious. So they want answers, I said, but only from me. She nodded again. I stood. Okay. She looked up, shocked. Okay, yes, I said calmly. They want the truth. I'll give it to them. She swallowed. Mrs. R, this could get messy. I smiled a slow, knowing smile. Oh, Ava, messy isn't the problem. The problem is that they think they're the only ones who know how to play. She blinked, confused. I continued. And they still think I'm the poor, naive mother. Ava whispered. You're not, are you? I looked her straight in the eyes. No, sweetheart, I'm not. And for the first time since I met her, Ava truly understood. I wasn't the fragile woman her family thought I was. Not even close. That evening, the three of us, me, Daniel, and Ava, drove to the Harris house. Daniel kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, concerned. Mom, please don't go in there trying to prove anything. I'm not proving anything, I said, but I'm done letting people underestimate me. Ava squeezed Daniel's hand. They're not in a good mood, she whispered. I smirked. They'll be in a much worse mood when I'm done. We pulled up to the Harris home, their oversized house with its fancy brick facade and empty luxury. But now I saw it differently. I saw the cracks, the peeling paint on the garage, the dying grass they couldn't afford to replace, the luxury SUV with a half-torn temporary registration sticker. Everything made sense now. They were pretending. Desperately. We walked up to the door, and it opened immediately. Lauren stood there with her arms crossed, her expression stiff with anger. Rick stood behind her, looking like he had been dragged into the conversation against his will. Brooke was on the couch, fake crying into her phone. The moment we stepped inside, Lauren glared at me. "Let's sit," she said sharply. "Let's," I replied calmly. We all sat in their living room, tension thick enough to choke on. Lauren took a deep breath and said, "Before this wedding moves forward, we need full transparency." I nodded. "Then, ask what you want to ask." She narrowed her eyes. "What is your financial situation?" Daniel stiffened. "Mom, you don't have to." I held up a hand. "No, sweetheart, let her finish." Lauren spoke again. "We need to know what kind of family our daughter is marrying into, and whether there will be support available in the future." I stared at her for a long, slow moment. Then I leaned forward and said, "You want the truth." She lifted her chin. "Yes," I smiled. "You're not ready for it." Her face flushed red with anger. "Try me," she snapped. So I did. "Your daughter already told me you're broke," I said softly. The room went dead silent. Rick choked. Brooke gasped. Brooke gasped. Lauren froze. Completely froze, her eyes widening with horror. And I didn't stop. "And you're not looking for equality in this marriage. You're looking for security. You want someone to rescue the image you built and can't maintain anymore. You want someone to carry the burden you've been hiding." Ava covered her mouth, tears already spilling. Daniel turned pale. And Lauren, she trembled. How she whispered, "How dare you?" "No," I said firmly. "How dare you? How dare you judge me, insult me, look down on me, when you were the ones hiding everything, when you wanted to use my son to fix your financial mess?" No one moved. No one breathed. Then I leaned back, calm as ever. "And since you wanted transparency, here is mine." I pulled a small folder from my purse and set it on the table. Lauren stared at it like it was a bomb. "This," I said, "is my financial portfolio, my income, my investments, my properties. You wanted to know what Daniel is marrying into." Her mouth dropped open. "Well," I continued, "he's marrying into a family that doesn't need him to save them. We don't need your money. We don't need your approval. And we sure as hell don't need your permission." I stood. Conversation over. Battle 1. War ended, or so they thought. Because part 7 is where everything explodes.